Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 280 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today, I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to Nikki. Nikki is Felicity's mom, and as you will hear on the show, Nikki is also friends with another mom who has been on the podcast, so we'll talk about that quite a bit in the show. I also want to remind you, if you would like to be on the Always Andy's Mom podcast, please email me. You can email me at Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, at andysmom.com. Also, make sure to visit the website to see all of the wonderful pictures of Felicity. Also, watch us on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, where you can see wonderful little videos showing pictures and home video of Felicity and all of our guests as well. Right now, though, I just want you to sit back and enjoy listening to Nikki, Felicity's mom. Thank you so much, Nikki, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited to have you. So we have a mutual friend.
We sure do.
We sure do.
A wonderful mutual friend.
We do. Jen is our mutual friend, and I was just, going through and telling Nikki how it is that Jen even discovered that you were going to be on the podcast, because I think that was really funny. So as all of you know, Jen and David are now doing the videos for the Always Andy's Mom podcast, and we were having a little bit of trouble getting the videos to Jen, so I had to just give her my Zoom login. So she logged in one day and quickly wrote to me, "You're interviewing Nikki? I know Nikki. Nikki and I have been friends for years."
Yeah.
Because your sons are best friends.
Yep, they sure are. For literally since they were in diapers.
I know, and it's so crazy because you knew each other long before you suffered your losses.
Yep.
Because you each lost your fourth children.
Correct.
So, I mean, when she said she knew you, I assumed originally like it was from Luella's Lodge or was somehow to do with grief, right?
Right.
Because in the grief world, you do tend to know people and you've heard of people.
Right, for sure.
That are grieving. But this had nothing to do with that. This was just years before. So anyway, I found that really, really cool. She found it really cool. And now I get to talk to Jen's friend, who's been Jen's friend forever. So
super cool people.
I know. But we're here today not to talk about Jen, but to talk about your daughter, Felicity. So do you just want to start out by just telling us all about her?
Felicity is my fourth child, my third daughter. I have 3 girls and a boy. Mm-hmm. Felicity was born in 2019. She completed our family. She was and is. I had everything that I ever wanted when Felicity was born. I had my three beautiful children. I had my new baby. I had my husband. Life was really good.
Yeah.
When I was pregnant with Felicity, we didn't have a lot of reason to be concerned. Mm-hmm. She moved a little bit less than my other babies did, and she was much smaller, but nothing that was like, woo, 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 red flag.
Right. Because each pregnancy can be different, right? And each baby's different, and so I don't think,
Exactly.
that would be all that alarming. You've got the 4, and all 4 were different and had their different little things, and you just thought this was just her.
Yeah. Until she was born. Immediately when she was born, I knew something wasn't right.
Uh-huh.
She breathed really, really fast and heavy and wet sounding. And they kept telling me, like, while we were still in the hospital, that was because she came out really fast.
Uh-huh.
I went from 3 to 10 in 15 minutes or something. I mean, it was really crazy.
Okay.
So they kept telling me that she came out too fast. She just couldn't clear, all the
Yeah.
fluid from her lungs, and it would, clear up and yada, yada, yada.
I mean, which does make a lot of sense. You can have something called transient tachypnea of the newborn, and that often does happen when they haven't had enough squeeze to kind of
Squeeze it out.
squeeze everything out of them, and they're just kind of
Right.
juicy, really, and
Right. So we did.
breathe really fast.
That's what we thought.
Yeah.
And she was also tiny. My oldest daughter was 9 pounds, 14 ounces. And all of my kids were 8.5 or above. So when Felicity came out and she was 6 pounds, I was like, "Ooh, this is a little strange." But again, all different, right?
Sure.
It wasn't until our first pediatrician checkup after we got out of the hospital that they were like, "Yeah, she lost quite a bit of weight. Let bring her back in, get in with a lactation consultant, do all the things." Still, again, nothing super alarming. So I did all the things. We were, feeding her around the clock on demand, taking her in to be weighed every other day. And she just kept losing weight. It didn't seem to matter what we did. She just kept losing weight. Finally, I took her in to an urgent care pediatrician because I was like, something is not right with my child. And they sent us to the emergency room. And in the emergency room, she was diagnosed with aspiration pneumonia. And also there were some other things that were concerning at the time. So we were admitted to the hospital. Genetics came by. I didn't know genetics was coming by.
Really? Yeah.
So the whole thing was really shocking to me. And genetics as a whole, in my experience, my goodness, are not the most bedside manner, wonderful doctors.
That's true.
They don't have the best bedside manner. And they basically came in and started telling me all of the things that were wrong with my child. And I knew this. She had excess skin all over the back of her neck, her arms, her legs. It was almost like she had a coat of skin. It just hung off her.
Okay.
Her soft spot was already closed.
Oh, wow.
And she was only just a couple weeks old. She had massive tone issues. And then the most prominent thing that they noticed was that she lacked an abdominal muscle.
Okay.
Which actually then made so much sense because I was like, this child has no control over her body whatsoever. She was so floppy. And of course, newborns are kind of potato-ish, right?
Yeah, but not that much.
But this was different.
Yeah.
So we went ahead during that hospital stay. We did genetic testing. We did MRI. They actually did a scope of her airway and diagnosed her with laryngomalacia and did a surgery for that. But the most, I think, the biggest thing that came out of that was that we stopped nursing. And she went on an NG tube because of the aspiration. Sure. So after that, I never got to nurse my baby again. But I thought at the time still that, okay, we're gonna find the answer, and that maybe she's just working too hard at nursing, and that's why she's not growing, and
And I'm sure people were optimistic. Nikki,
sure.
We NG feed her. She doesn't have to work. Kids have to work really hard to feed. If she doesn't have to work at all, this will be much, much easier for her. Right?
That was the hope, and then she would grow, right?
Yeah.
So we were discharged on an apnea monitor, an NG, and then with the genetics pending.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, she was hospitalized again because she had lost a significant amount of weight. During that hospital stay, they approached it a little different. At the time, it was difficult for me, but I get it now, where they provided 100% of the care. I wasn't allowed to do anything. I'm sure you can understand what they were looking for.
Yep.
Well, she lost almost a pound under their care.
Right.
So that's when they were like, something is really not right. We switched to an NJ tube, so went into her intestine. Did rapid genome sequencing at that point, which was going to take about 10 days. And then we just kind of waited.
Yeah.
The first genetic testing came back. We were given a genetic diagnosis, but it didn't really fit. And they were all very baffled. So she had 2 pathogenic mutations for something called myeloid myopathy. But it explains some things and not some others. And actually, then we went and did a muscle biopsy, and there were no Nemline rods found. So
that was not correct diagnosis at all then.
kind of unclear
Yeah. Okay.
what that was. Now, we've also talked to neuromuscular doctors to say they wouldn't have showed up until later anyway.
Oh, okay.
But we don't, yeah. Anyway, to kind of fast forward through the story, eventually she was put on TPN.
And that's IV nutrition for people that don't know what that stands for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she was exclusively IV fed. She also had the NJ to just kind of keep her gut working.
Yeah.
But she wasn't really getting like a nutritional benefit from that. And even with the TPN, she still never grew. So when Felicity passed away, she was 21 months old and she weighed less than 9 pounds still.
Wow.
Despite being on aggressive nutrition therapy. She never really gained any. The only milestone she ever really hit was smiling, which makes me really happy.
Yes.
She never sat, she never crawled, she never did any of those things. I got to a point where that was okay with me. I just wanted her to, I didn't care what form we had her in. I just wanted her, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that smile can do so much too.
That smile was, I say it all the time, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The first time it happened, I mean, because they had told me she probably wouldn't even do that at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when she did, I was just, and it was in response to something. So it wasn't just like a, social smile. It was a real smile. She, she was really conveying something. She never said a word. I don't know what her voice sounded like, but she spoke volumes with her eyes. People say that all the time. Felicity had the most expressive eyes. You always knew. And you always knew what she was thinking just because she was sassy, like really sassy. And I think to kind of put the whole story in context, all of this was occurring basically during the height of COVID.
Wow.
So my family, my other children, my husband and I are basically locked at home. We couldn't get nursing because it was during COVID and nurses weren't really they weren't going into homes, at least not around here. And not that we could find. We had home nursing for like her central line. So they would come and draw our blood and do the dressing changes and all that stuff. But other than that, like we didn't really have any help. So this was all, it was very intense.
Yeah.
And then, so kind of fast forward, we took her all over the place. Anywhere that our home geneticist said, this is a good lead, we followed it. We went to Philadelphia, Atlanta, and then the Undiagnosed Diseases program, just searching for somebody who could tell me what was happening to my daughter. And we got a lot of theories and, rabbit holes to go down, but again, no real answer. In September of 2020, she started to get what I thought was a cold.
Mm-hmm.
She was just really off. I couldn't really explain it. By that point, she was on palliative care. So I contacted our doctor and I said, I feel like something isn't right. And they were like, well, if you feel that way, take her in. So I did. I took her to the ER, which for me to be saying that was a big deal because I certainly wasn't taking my 9-pound, almost 2-year-old to the ER during a pandemic, right?
Right.
Unless she needed to be there.
Right.
When we got there, her temperature, she was hypothermic. She was incredibly ill, and I really had no idea. I didn't know how ill she was until tests started rolling in.
But you knew things were really off or you wouldn't have been there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She was admitted to the PICU in multi-system organ failure. They suspected she had an infection, but they couldn't actually find. And her central line was clear. She didn't have COVID. They did ultrasounds and scan. They could find nothing. But all of her markers for infection were like through the roof. So it didn't make any sense. But also everything was showing. Her kidneys were failing. Her heart was failing. Like things were moving in not a great direction. And I will never forget September 30th, 2020. I was in the PICU with her by myself because, again, during COVID, only one parent was allowed. So I was alone. And the whole slew of them came in. I mean, doctors and nurses and social workers and all the people. They were all in the room. And I was like, oh, geez, this is not it.
Yeah.
And they told me that I think his exact words were, medicine has reached the end of what it can do for your daughter. Our suggestion is that you take her home on hospice and enjoy her.
Yeah.
And so we did. That day, actually, they moved mountains to get her home because we didn't know if it was going to be a day, a week, a month. And I didn't want her to die in that hospital.
Right.
And I didn't want her to die there without her family. I didn't want to die alone with me. So we did. We took her home. And we took her home on antibiotics because, again, remember, they thought she was like septic. Like she had some terrible infection. They couldn't figure it out. So we took her home on IV antibiotics. And I thought, like, okay, well, maybe if we clear whatever this is, it'll reverse all the, my saying through this whole thing was hope dies last.
Yeah.
And I held on to that until she literally was gone. So, I just thought, okay, well, we'll go home and maybe things will be okay. So we took her home and we loved her and we snuggled her, and I spent every moment of my life on the couch with that child because she just wanted to be here all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Her brothers and sister would come and, hold her little hand or snuggle her, but for the most part, she was here. And we did some things, again, during COVID. It really kind of limited where we could go and what we could do. So we took her to the zoo and did, outdoor safer things. And then actually at this exact time in 2020, we were on a trip. Our community gathered together and sent us to like an Airbnb. Mm-hmm. We were at the Airbnb and I knew things were not good. We ended up leaving a day early because we were afraid that she wasn't going to make it through the drive home.
Mm-hmm.
So we came home early because we were out of state and our hospice team couldn't see her like out of state. So we wanted her to be with her people. So we brought her home and they confirmed what I had feared, that, we were kind of nearing the end there. And we spent the last week with her. She was absolutely miserable. She had like intense pain, but nobody could ever really figure out. But she acquired like insane doses of morphine and all kinds of other stuff. It was honestly really awful, to the point where when she finally was dying, I hope this makes sense, I actually felt a sense of relief.
Yeah.
Because my baby was suffering so much.
And you just want the suffering to be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you just hate watching your children suffer. It's just so awful.
It was one of the most horrific things I've ever experienced. I feel sad when my children get a paper cut.
Yes.
So to watch this, it was really, really hard.
Especially when you can't do anything about it.
And then to also manage all my other kids. Right. I mean, it's not like she could tell me. She just screamed all the time. And we kind of knew that something had shifted when she stopped screaming. And we did. We loved her. We put up a Christmas tree. She had what they call like I forgot what they call it, like the resurgence or revival or something. She had like a really good day. Yeah. Right. And we were like, yes, this is great. We have beautiful pictures. I'll send you some of those. I mean, it was the best day ever. And it was all centered around the Christmas tree. So we were like, yes, Christmas lights. We're going to take her to the zoo to see the lights, right?
Uh-huh.
We did that the night before she passed away. We went to the zoo, and 24 hours later, she died at home in my arms, on my couch. We knew that day that she woke up and she had symptoms. She had stopped peeing and she was very, very swollen and all kinds of other things. So we knew that it was going to happen shortly after that. We sent my other kids to actually, my son was at Jen and David's house.
Oh.
He spent the night there. And I'm really glad for that, because I don't, it wasn't peaceful and beautiful like some people describe. For me, it was horrific. Like, it was really horrible to watch, and I'm glad my kids, the last thing they remember is kissing Felicity goodbye and, leaving the house. They don't remember all that really awful stuff. And yeah, she passed away in my arms. She wouldn't let me hold her all day. She just seemed, she wasn't really with it, but she seemed really agitated anytime you tried to touch her or hold her. So she just kind of laid next to me on a boppy pillow. And then when things were very clear, I picked her up and I put her here.
Yeah.
And I sang the song that I always sang to her. And she took her last breath at 1:44 in the morning on December 6th, 2020. And I always say that I let her suffering end, and that's when mine started.
Yeah.
Because I miss my baby.
And you probably didn't realize it at the time either, Like
No,
you had said, you thought you felt a little sense of relief in some ways, but then that relief doesn't last very long,
it doesn't.
because then the reality comes.
And I would do it all again in a heartbeat.
What?
I wouldn't change any of it. I mean, I would obviously rather she was here, but like
Sure, of
in
course.
the condition and the way that her life was, I know in my heart that we made the best decision for Felicity.
Mhm.
I'm sure that there are things that we could have done to drag things on or whatever. Although in the end, really, Felicity decided. We hadn't stopped any care. She was still on TPN and oxygen up until right before she passed away. I mean, like hours before. She was still getting all her medications. So really, in the end, her body made the decision. I always say we put her on hospice, but honestly, no. Like her body did this.
Yeah, her body knew, right? Her body knew.
So yeah, and then that kind of begins like the next part of our journey, which is, living out Felicity's story and honoring her life and her memory and using, what we learned and what we gathered to kind of be like a light for other people who are experiencing this.
Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that? You touched on that, kids with undiagnosed diseases. Go into that a little more, because honestly, most people probably don't even know that exists or anything about it.
Yeah. Now, I didn't know. I had no idea. You assume, right? Doctors, they know. They know everything, right? Or they'll figure it out. I didn't realize that this was an actual thing. And in fact, like I said, there's a whole program for it, the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And I really had no idea. So when, Felicity was really like very symptomatic and I just felt incredibly alone because I couldn't find people, who were experiencing this. I knew by that point a lot of other people whose kids had various genetic conditions or similar things, but I didn't know anybody whose story was like ours. So I actually went and I posted a video on TikTok. Not expecting anything, but it kind of went viral, and I have kind of created this whole community of parents and caregivers who are on this journey. I volunteer also now for the Undiagnosed Diseases Network. And one of the women I volunteer with, her daughter has a very rare disease. And she calls it the labyrinth because a journey usually has a beginning and an end, right? But a labyrinth is, it just kind of keeps going. And that kind of really summed it up for me quite well. Because even now, I'm still in touch with our genetics team, and they do still run Felicity's DNA periodically to see if we can, come up with some answer. Because for me, it won't change anything, right? Felicity's gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the truth. And there's also another Felicity somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I'd say that. There's another Felicity somewhere whose mom is sitting there at 2 a.m. on Google wanting an answer for their child. And someday, because I kept pushing, it's my hope that that mom will get the answer that she needs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely added sort of another layer to our experience. I think also, you tell people, oh, I have 4 children. How old are they? Blah, blah, blah. Felicity passed away. Oh, how did she pass away? I have no idea. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what a strange answer. I don't know. Oh, she had SIDS? No, she was almost 2. So it's definitely added a different piece to the whole thing. And, it's been kind of a journey for me to get to this place where I don't want to say I'm at peace with it, because I don't think that's entirely true. But there were many years where I blamed myself, and I could have done this, or I should have done that, or why didn't I do this, or whatever. Because when you don't have an answer and you don't have a treatment plan, you're just kind of picking the best option out of, whatever's presented to you. And I second guessed myself, and I struggled for several years with a lot of, blame and doubt and guilt. And I've kind of come to a place where I've realized that I did the best that I could with what I had at the time.
Right.
I didn't know any better, so I couldn't have done any better. I did the best that I could. And I had, we had teams of doctors advising us. It's not like we were just like, let's do this,
Well, and it's frustrating to be a medical provider too and not have any answers. I've certainly been on that side. I told you before I started recording, I've got a couple of patients in my practice who we don't really know what they have. I mean, there's definitely something genetic. They've seen genetics. They've gone to multiple geneticists in different states, and nobody really knows. And it's hard and it's frustrating, and you just have to, treat them. I mean, I remember saying to the parents, like, well, we're just going to call it, and then name the child syndrome. That's just
exactly what her geneticist called it. Felicity syndrome. Yep.
Exactly. It's Felicity syndrome. Let's just go with that. We don't have anything else. And really, we're just treating Felicity. We're just treating that patient in that unique way as best as we possibly can. I told you about the one I had come in, and she was 12 months old, and she came in for her 12-month well visit. And I remember looking at her. She was so tiny, so incredibly tiny, not a 12-month-old. And I just remember looking at those parents and just saying, tell me about your daughter. Because nobody had sent any records, nobody had sent anything, because nobody had a clue what was going on with this child.
Right.
But that's, I think, the best thing to do at that time is to just tell me about her. Let's just learn about her now. Because I don't have a label I can put on it. So, and in some ways, I think that is a better approach, even for kids that do have a diagnosis, to still treat the patient more than just a diagnosis.
100%. 100%. We did a video because, again, during COVID, we did a video consult with CHOP. And I will never forget, one of the most impactful things that a medical professional said to me was, undiagnosed is a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me. But more than that, they went through all their stuff and they evaluated her. And, and he goes, okay, now that we've picked your daughter apart, why don't you tell me about her? What makes her smile?
Mm-hmm.
What is your day-to-day life like? And like the people who really made an effort to get to know us
Yeah.
made all the difference in the world, because
Right.
so many, I mean, we saw so many people, and I get it. Like medical professionals are saints and honestly so overworked and so little time and whatever. But even just to take 2 minutes and say, what makes this child smile? What makes her happy? What does she like? What calms her down?
Yeah.
You know, it that's the stuff that I remember. And I said, you know, when we were really going through this, I said, like, I want to remember my daughter as my daughter, not as a disease, not as the illness that took her life, not, you know, as a floppy child with severe cutis laxa, which is, you know, what her medical whatever says. Like, that's not who she was.
No.
You know, she was a silly, incredibly sassy little girl. Like, and that's also helped humanizing her instead of making her just into like a medical diagnosis helped a lot. And I think that that's kind of like a broader lesson that I've learned from all this is, you know, we all have a thing, right? Like everybody has a thing, but I'm not that thing. I'm Nikki. You know, my daughter with anxiety is not anxiety. She's great.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's actually been kind of a mind shift for me to look at people as people, not, you know, because everyone's got a story.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's something that I feel is so important, because I have people too, kids that I know that get so focused on the label,
right,
that they don't think of anything else other than the label. Like, let's throw away the label for a minute. Let's just talk about you.
Exactly. And when you don't have a label, it almost opens up kind of those extra, you know, like a new pathway to look at what was happening. And, you know, and it also, I mean, honestly, I wonder too, like, doctors really kind of thought outside the box with her because there was no box, right? So, and I don't know, you know, if every decision we made was actually the right decision, right? But I think that her not having a diagnosis caused them to really think big, you know, to throw whatever at the wall and hope something stuck. Whereas, you know, if you have a diagnosis, it's like, okay, well, this is plan A. That doesn't work. Then we do plan B, you know, and there's prescribed treatments and all these things where that might not be the best.
All these algorithms that you go down, right? Yeah. When it's all drawn out, you do A, and if A doesn't work, you go to B, and if B doesn't work, you go to C, and if that kind of works, then, you know, but it's,
we didn't have any of that.
It takes something away in some ways.
Yeah, it really does. And it kind of, I think it also helped me to kind of take some of that responsibility and guilt away, because again, like I said, I did the best I could with what we had at the time. You know, I didn't know anything different. So.
Yep. For sure. So it's been now almost 4 years. By the time this releases, it will be more than 4 years. So talk about that a little bit.
So it's been, like I said, now this part I do call a journey.
Yeah.
It's been hard. It's you know, it's been twofold for me. I'll share some personal information just because this is information I share openly anyway. After Felicity passed away, I struggled intensely with anorexia. I couldn't feed my baby. I couldn't help her grow and thrive. And so I fell into the mindset that I didn't need to do the same for myself either, or I didn't deserve to do the same for myself. I spent the better part of 2 years in and out of therapy and treatment programs and all sorts of other things, kind of trying to navigate that. So that was one major part of my journey. And I've kind of come on the other side of that. Things are not perfect, but I've come to realize, like I keep saying, I did the best I could with what I had. And it's not as if I did anything, right? Like, her body did this. It was not me.
Right.
There was nothing
Right.
I could have done or not done that would have changed anything.
It's funny though that it takes you a long time to get to that point, right?
It took me a very long time. And there are still days.
I think it takes a lot of people a lot of time to
Yeah.
do that. So
There are
you're
still
not
days.
totally unique in that. It's just it's so funny because I have talked to so many parents now over these last years who have had their kids die in so many different ways. And every single parent I've talked to has carried a bit of guilt, no matter
Yep.
what it is.
Yep.
It doesn't matter at all what
Right.
it is. They still do
It's
because
like that innate
yes,
thing.
yes.
It
Even
really
if
is.
they're 45 and they made a bad choice or something, or got in a freak car accident at 45 years old, you
still
still, as a
wonder,
parent, feel guilty.
what could I have
Like,
done?
What
Right.
you think there's something you could have done, right? Because you
Yeah.
think you've got this control, no matter if they're
But you don't.
a newborn baby or a grown adult. You
Right.
feel this responsibility always.
You do. And it's hard to not, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's just being a parent.
So for you
like,
to take some time to get through that, totally natural. It's completely understandable.
yeah. And then the second part of it, for me, I think the second big piece has been my children's grief.
Yeah.
My grief is crushing, but watching my children, that, I would say, like, there's those moments where you're like, man, I'm not going to make it through this. And most of those moments come when they're struggling.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for me, but like, it's another thing to not be able to make it better for them. And that's something I really, that's the soul searching thing I had to get to, is that I can't fix this.
Yeah.
I cannot make this better. I can support them in their grief. We talk about Felicity all the time. Honestly, if you came to my house, you might think she was still here. Some of her equipment is still here. Some things have not been touched or moved, and that's just what we do.
Yeah.
And my kids talk about her. Oh, let's see this. Let's see. She's very present in our lives.
I love that.
But when it's 11 o'clock at night, my 7-year-old is crying because she misses her baby sister. Those are the moments where I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna make it through this. Like, this is it. This is the hard stuff, because it's not just like she's a sad 7-year-old. I mean, what do you do with that? She's 7, 9, 11. They're little kids still, right? And they've been through this awful thing. So their grief has actually been the worst thing I've dealt with, and the driving force for me to keep going, right? Because my kids need their parent. They need their mom. They need their dad. They need to feel safe and loved, and they need to know that, like, grief is okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be mad. Like, all of these things they're experiencing are okay. We're very much an open household. There's no pretending like Felicity didn't exist or any of that stuff. We grieve very openly here. And I actually think that that's been great. We follow their lead. I mean, I'm not going to go around and poking them. Hey, are you sad today? Like, we don't do anything like that. But, if somebody's having a bad day, they're not afraid to say, I'm really missing Felicity today, or I'm really mad, or, my son has told me, I'm mad at her. Why'd she leave? Which I think is a very normal kid thought process.
Yeah.
So I think that's been kind of the biggest piece of the past 4 years, is dealing with my own feelings of just grief and guilt and confusion. I think a lot of confusion.
Well, that would make sense too, especially when you just don't have answers, right?
And I think hoping. I mean, I still hold out so much hope that we will know someday. I mean, someday science will catch up. And again, like I said earlier, it won't change anything for me, but it'll change something for, Sarah, who's sitting there looking at her child and thinking, and for me, that makes continuing on worth it,
Well, you talked earlier before we started recording about how they did her genetics, and there were some things that came out as abnormal on that. But the genes then, when they don't know which of those abnormalities might be causing something, they will just say it's a variant of
unknown significance, a
unknown significance.
VUS.
Yeah, a variant of unknown significance, and there are plenty of those. And honestly, I mean, if you did all of our genomes, we'd probably all have some of those. We'd all have those because there are many parts, little, things flipped around or whatever that don't make a huge impact.
Exactly.
So that's why it's so hard to be able to figure out what it is. So,
and like our geneticists explained to me that until we find another person who is experienced,
you need another Felicity.
Yes.
To then go through and say, oh, that unknown variant is the same. So this is what caused it. But until you have another one like that, you can't know.
No. And that's hard. It is hard.
Yeah, it is really hard.
It's really hard to not know.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure. It's so funny because I think of my therapist when I'm talking to you, because my therapist always says moms always want to know why. They always want to know exactly what happened. So for me, obviously Andy died in a car accident, but I have lost memory of the accident and a time after. So there's about 30 minutes in my mind that is just gone. And it's very bothersome to me. Like, I want to know exactly what happened in that time, and I don't. I want to know those answers. So, and she tried to do some kind of therapy with me to try to see if we could kind of get to those memories and get through some of that painful stuff to be able to remember. And I just can't. And, and I've learned to, I guess, accept that in some ways. But then I think that much of your life is like that, not knowing the answer. So it's not just that 30 minutes. It's just not having answers to things. And I think that's just so important for parents to feel like they knew.
But I think that what you just said is actually really powerful, is that you come to a place, I think I said this earlier, I haven't made peace with it, but have accepted it.
Yeah.
Because I can't change that right now, right? Mm-hmm. I can keep making strides to hopefully change that. But today, November, whatever day it is, I cannot change that. And I spent a lot of time making myself ill, trying to do that. So I have come to a place, it's not okay. It's not okay at all. I hate it, to be honest with you. I hate that I don't know why my baby is not with me.
Yeah.
But I have accepted that in this moment of time, I don't know. And nothing that I can do right now can change that. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's been another one of those. I feel like that was kind of like an aha for me, though. Like that was one of the things that kind of shifted my course a little bit, and kind of taking some of that blame and guilt off of myself, because
that's beautiful.
I'm not magic. I mean, if all these intelligent, super genius genetics, then all these people can't figure it out, I certainly can't. Mm-hmm. So, but that's been a really powerful piece of this for me is and I think that was kind of a theme of her entire life, was that I had to just sort of accept things that didn't always make sense. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, why isn't my child growing? I don't know, but this is what we're going to do. Right?
Right.
That's just one example of kind of coming to this place of accepting things that I cannot control.
Well, I want to touch again a little bit on Jen and David, because we started out talking about them, just knowing them and how you had been friends for many, many years. But then obviously they went on their grief journey about a year and a half or so after you did.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't mind you touching on that a little bit. And of course, your boys, because we've spent a good amount of time talking about your kids and them grieving.
Yeah.
And now those boys would be grieving a bit together in a way.
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I found out that Jen was having problems with AJ at Felicity's birthday celebration. Every year we get together. There was a tree planted in her memory, and we get together for her birthday. And David was there with the boys, and Jen wasn't there, which I thought was a little strange. But at the time, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I had just found out that AJ was, that he had problems. And I think initially they were very much like me, where, like I said, hope dies last, right?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah, for sure.
This child is born with 100 things that aren't good.
Yeah.
And yet they still held on to hope.
They chose joy, right? That's what their motto was. Choose joy. Mm-hmm.
They did. They chose joy. And I will tell you that watching their journey was during a very dark time in my own life.
Yes. I was thinking the same thing. It's why I asked you that, because I know the timing.
Yes.
I feel like my low point was 18 months. And like that
it was right
coincides
then.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
And my son, I remember, was when after AJ was born, my son is a helper. He wants to help. And so we would pick up DI. DI is Jen and David's son, who's the same age as Brendan, my son. We would take him out. We'd go to the park. We'd do, we spent a lot of time together during that time. And I will tell you that one of the most impactful things that I've ever gotten to be a part of was they did AJ's baptism on Zoom, and they let people, call in, and I remember, I want to say it was Jen and David and perhaps other family members, and I honestly don't remember the details, but they were singing. And the way they sung to him did something in my soul. That probably sounds really cheesy, but it's true. Watching this experience and watching how they loved this child, and watching how despite everything, they were still able to hold on to the good, reminded me that was my goal too. I kind of got lost in this, like,
you do.
This is awful. There's nothing good. And there is nothing good about your child passing away, right?
No.
That would be crazy. But it had grown bigger for me that there was nothing good, period.
Yeah,
like,
right.
in life. There was nothing good.
Nothing ever could be good in life.
Right. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, okay, like, we can do this. And I remember when Jen texted me in the night and said, he's coded. I don't think he's going to make it through the night. And then, it happened again. And then she did text me and say, he passed away at, XYZ time. And I remember telling my son the next morning, and he said, I need to go give DI a hug. All he needs right now is a hug, Mom. He doesn't need anyone to tell him anything. He needs a hug. And I just thought, for 9-year-old boys, or maybe they were 8 at the time, that was so profound that he knew that there was nothing he could say. Yeah. There was nothing that could make it better. And we went to AJ's celebration of life, which was very difficult for all of us. Yeah, it was the first time I had been in any kind of setting like that since Felicity's. And Jen was standing up at the front, near AJ, and I had gone on a retreat myself, a different one in New Jersey called Hayden's House. And they gave us these little ceramic elephants because when, an elephant has something terrible happen, they crowd around the mom and they carry her basically. So I slipped it into Jen's hand and I said, I'm so sorry that you're now part of this tribe. And since then, our sons have been, I think, a great support for each other. We attend a grief group together.
Mm-hmm.
The boys go off to their age group. The parents go off to their age group, and the boys have been, it's honestly really beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
In those moments where they don't have to just be typical 9-year-old boys. They could just be sad or mad or talk about, my son will say, it's so nice to be around DI because I could talk about Felicity and he understands, whereas, and it's not that his other friends are, mean about it or anything, but they don't get
No,
it.
but they just think it's kind of weird, I'm
Right.
sure.
My sister died,
Like, okay.
cool. And I think for me, as a person who's not as outgoing as Jen and David, to watch kind of this beautiful story that they've created after has been really inspiring to me. And I hope that you share this with them because
She'll see it. She watches these videos, so.
I just, I remember telling David at a meeting once that he didn't have to choose joy all the time, that it was okay to be angry and feel all the things. And also that I thought it was so beautiful that despite everything, they were still able to even say those words, even if they're not living them all the time.
Yeah.
And it really did. I think that us having this existing relationship before we experienced these losses has really made our grief journeys, I don't want to say easier, but this was a person I already knew.
Yeah.
I didn't have to come in and explain anything. And they were with us for the whole thing,
right.
and we were, as much as we could have been with them also. So it is, I've met a lot of other grieving parents at this point, but they're all people who I met after, So these are people who knew the Nikki who existed before 2020.
Yeah.
These are people who have seen me at my best and seen me at my absolute worst. And likewise, it goes both ways. And it's honestly just been a really beautiful, comforting. And it's one of those things where, me and Jen can go weeks without talking and then we'll just pick it right back up,
Yep.
And there's nothing weird or awkward. I could text her and be like, man, I really miss her today. And that's all I have to say. I don't explain myself. And it is really a beautiful thing to have a friend who sees you fully. Yeah. And for my son, my son and Felicity had an extremely special relationship. They were, if you ask him, she was his best friend. He was in preschool at the time. So my littlest one was a baby still, basically. And then my son was in preschool and my older daughter was in school full time until COVID hit.
So in some ways, he knew her best.
Right. He spent a ton of time with her.
Yeah.
And they had a really special thing. So, it's been, as a mom, and again, somebody who wants to fix all the things, knowing that he also has that friend who he can, lean on and talk about it with and not have to hide anything has been really helpful for me.
Yeah. And I love what he said right away, that he just needs a hug. So many adults need to hear that.
Right?
That's so incredibly wise.
It's okay to not say anything.
Most people that we see want to tell us something.
And
the ones that I treasured the most are the ones that didn't. The ones that just gave me a hug.
Yep. Me too.
So you've got a wise young boy there.
He's a good kid.
Yeah.
They're good kids. I always say this is the best and worst thing.
Yeah. They're all four special, right? All four.
Yeah. They all. Oh my God. I love my kids so much. I could talk about my kids forever.
Well, thank you so much for sharing Felicity with us today. It was
Yeah.
really just a joy to hear all about her.
Thank you. Can I tell you one more story that'll
Absolutely.
highlight the sassiness?
Yes. Yes. Love that.
A good way to wrap it up.
Good way to end.
So Felicity, she never played with toys or anything. I think
Yeah.
part of it was she couldn't really hold. I don't think she had the strength to hold a toy, but she was obsessed with candy wrappers or like medical. Like we would take syringes out and give her the wrapper. She loved it. And one of the ways that Brendan would like kind of bond with her was he would hold one up, and if she wanted it, she would take it. If she didn't, she'd just bat it away. I have the funniest video of her just batting them away. And that just really, I mean, that's really Felicity in a nutshell. Like really weird stuff and super sassy.
And
Like
yes,
again,
very
didn't say a
opinionated.
word when she did it. She just there was no
Nope, not
outward
today.
reaction. Just no, not for me.
Pushing it away.
And it was so funny because it'd be like a Snickers wrap, a Skittles wrap, a McDonald's hamburger wrap. Like you never knew which one she wanted. But it was really funny. And so it that sums up her personality in the best way I can tell you.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation, or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.